This is Al Fritz from earthhealing.info. Today we're going to have our YouTube devoted to Pierre Marquette, a priest who actually explored, discovered the Mississippi River and did the first exploration upon it with Joliet. And this is explained, by the way, in the book Water Sounds, which I wrote and is available through Marquette University. And it's the last 2 years of the life of Marquette because he dies soon after the discovery. So we will see the different areas. You could go and visit those, either take a long time and do it by water, or you can do it by auto and actually, for a short period of time, find all of the areas where he explored and settled down for a period of time. In the process of writing this book, Water Sounds, it seemed necessary to retravel the very routes that Pierre Marquette traveled in the discovery of the headwaters of the Mississippi and the lower portions of it. And so it was important for us to travel that, and that was what this video is about. It's the last 2 years, 1673 to 75, when Pierre actually teamed up with Joliet, another French explorer, and they traveled, and who was a Quebec adventurer, and they traveled the routes that we will show here. The purpose of the two men were different, but they overlapped. For religious and secular aims in those days seemed to overlap to some degree. Joliet was expedition leader in an aim to extend French influence over the entire mid-American hinterland that was drained by the great river, the Mississippi. Marquette's main concern was to spread the faith, the Catholic faith, to other Indian tribes. And he came to know, and having been very proficient in language, he was able to learn the Illinois nation's language, and he was very anxious to come and actually do missionary work in that part of the world. The starting point was St. Ignace Mission, where Upper and Lower Michigan comes together. And there Marquette regarded this as his base of operation because he was doing missionary work at that point in time. And there was a special pastoral concern. It was a beautiful territory where the northern and southern Michigan lands meet, and a lot of people come and do trading in that area, both then and now. The water straits between the two areas was then and now a meeting of commerce and social exchange. The date of departure was May 7th, 1673. The expedition consisted of a number of associates, 5 actual, and 2 large canoes, well packed with supplies including food staples, gifts for the Indians on the way, religious supplies, rain sheet, and clothing needed during the summertime, and also other protective gear that was needed, along with some basic hunting instruments, scientific devices, and writing materials. A map outlining the overview of the journey shows the small party skirting the southern shore of Upper Michigan and then coming down into Wisconsin in the area of what is now Green Bay. This is an area rich in game and wild rice, for that matter, because the people gather much of that during the growing season. But for this journey, it involves incoming waves because it was rough in the springtime, and the coastline lines had their own challenges. In the Green Bay area, they stopped at the rapids of the Fox River and met Father Louis Andre at the St. Francis Xavier Mission at Rapids de Pierre. De Pierre is where it is today. They observed the tidal areas of which the scientist Marquette had a special interest in local hydrology. On June 7th, there was a formal launching up the Fox River. They want to connect that with the waters of the Mississippi. And so it went past the rapids and on up the milder river currents to the point which is now called Portage in Wisconsin. It's a strip of land between which the drainage of the Fox ends and that of the Wisconsin and the Mississippi basin, for that matter, begins. We stayed for a while at the Portage because really it's beautiful in its flowers. And of course, it was a commercial strip even in Indian times between the two rivers. And you have to remember that since then, some canal work and development has occurred. But at the same time, it is still an area that is incredibly beautiful. This long strip brings us to the Wisconsin River and to an area where Joliet decided to follow the original planned route and use the shorter route by coming back through Lake Michigan on his return trip. It is beautiful to see the Wisconsin countryside because so much of the river's course is undeveloped except for the portage itself. The confluence of the Wisconsin and the Mississippi rivers is a magnificent sight then and even today. For Marquette, the view was a spiritual experience, and he wanted to name the river after the Virgin Mary. But over time, the Indian name still prevailed. One feels the excitement of the first white view of the Father of Waters at this upper stance. Entering the swift current must have been exhilarating, an experience that he actually talks about in the course of his journal. It was a time of seeing uninhabited river shore. It comes up constantly, and yet they found at times they would find human footprints, and they knew people were in the area. Through the riverside ride, the sight of unfamiliar species of birds and cattle, which are really the buffalo or the bison, on the shores, these were things that were new to these people because they hadn't seen anything like this before. It was a glamour that was exciting to see the plants and animals, the elk, the black bear, turtles, cranes, parakeets of many colors. These were birds and other forms of wildlife that were totally new, and they were and this expedition tried hard to note them in their scientific journals. We have to remember, and we say this at this point, is that the greater part of the scientific information was lost when Joliet, upon returning to Quebec, had a terrible water spill right before Montreal, which almost killed his people. But at the same time, they lost everything except what Marquette himself had and was still remaining with back in Michigan and Wisconsin. Trees such as oaks, linden, elms, chestnuts, and other nut-bearing fruits were actually observed, and as was the colorful columbine and the swamp buttercup. A single large fish could furnish a meal for all 7 hungry folk. They identified some of the fish as bass, sturgeon, whitefish, and further south, spoonfish and catfish. Marquette, who was at ease with languages and learned earlier from a long-staying visitor the language of the Illinois, was able to make contact on the descending trip, exchanging peace pipes with the elders, presenting gifts to various individuals, and enjoying a multi-course feast with them, including dog, which the party from France and Quebec could not eat. even though they were trying to be as close to the people as possible. And in fact, the people would feed them like you would a child in putting food into their mouths, and that was their way of being hospitable. The party observed the start of corn, beans, and squash cultivation because it was June and early July while they were traveling through. And the settlements were very well built and by the natives, and they used a lot of cultivated areas to furnish their own food. On the east shore could be seen a painting on the rocks, which spooked many of the river Indians. This is in what is now southern Illinois, still along the Mississippi River. The Marquette crew itself was very much spooked by these ugly figures that appeared. Marquette was amazed by the painting, which was in red, green, and black, and he called it the Piasa, the Piazza, a sign of river demons. This is near the modern Alton, Illinois site, and it's been reproduced, which is not the same picture as was seen by Marquette himself. The paintings depicted a part fierce wild animal and part human, and Marquette did not believe the natives had the ability to execute such an exposition. But he finally came to understand that Indians did have artistic abilities that could be expressed. The expedition passed the entry of the muddy Missouri with its volume of early summer water, and then the beautiful Ohio River further downstream. And there they could see it was blue and green and a beautiful entry of water. And as they traveled on, they saw the Missouri, then the Ohio, then the Tennessee, as these rivers would come into the Mississippi route. The intriguing territory to the east was Kentucky, and that included part of the Shawnee Territory, and they were reported to be a peace-loving people, and this was their hunting territory. Marquette and the company observed a wide variety of new plants and animals as they kept going further south. They described these in notebooks but those notebooks, of course, as we said, were lost in that spill. But as they were coming closer south, they were beginning to worry because they knew that the mouth of the Mississippi was possibly controlled by the Spaniards, and the Indians, as they were coming along, they had guns, and they had different possessions that showed that they were in commerce with the Spanish. Now we have to remember at this point that the Spanish and the French were at odds with each other, and there was not a clearance that had been made prior to this in order for them to go and intermingle. In fact, they would have been arrested. They come to the Arkansas River and were not willing to go too much further south. Actually, the Bishop of Quebec, Laval, had given Marquette the assignment of being Vicar General, which was a church title in this discovered territory. The Spanish would have been very reluctant to violate this state of affairs. Still, the French nature of the expedition made it somewhat problematic, whether capture might have been possible and what that would mean. So without seeing the mouth of the river, on July 17th, the party turned back with some misgivings. Marquette may have got some dysentery at about this stage because his trip back was a very hard one. On the difficult return, they of course were going against the current. The party passed some foreign Indians who invited them to a feast with them on bison. They were able to put to shore and enjoy the peace pipe with others, one of which knew the Illinois language. They were able to tour a village in what was Chickasaw territory, some 10 days' journey from the mouth of the Mississippi, and it was but these Indians were more bellicose than others. After the struggle to return upstream, the party took the Illinois River route in return. They didn't follow the way they came. They passed through Starved Rock, or, or in the central part of Illinois that was inhabited by a large number of Illinois Indians, and they were received in open arms by the natives. Of course, Marquette knew their language. They treated the party well and furnished guides to help them find the way of portage up the lake to make Lake Michigan. Marquette fell in love with the place and was determined to return as a missionary. And in fact, he did. He came right before his death. In the rather uneventful final days, the party reached the Green Bay area, and De Pere Mission was where Marquette remained and convalesced for the rest of the year and through 1674, for his health was very poor at that time. Later that year, he and others went to a location around South Chicago and stayed through the winter, and then struck out in late Lent and arrived at Starved Rock again in the Holy Week. At Easter, he held a service before 500 elders, 1,500 braves, and countless women and children, and this was the greatest event in his life. Immediately after that, the party started because he was dying. They started north, and he died at Ludington, Michigan shore on May 16th. No, pardon me. He died on May 18th, 1675. His bones and remains were removed then by the Indians to the final resting place, which is near St. Ignace. This can be seen today in the monument there. In this video, we have introduced you to Pierre Marquette and some of the areas that he traveled in and he actually suffered and died in. And this was in the final 2 years of his life. And we hope that you have an opportunity to come and visit those areas sometime. This is Al Fritz from earthhealing.info. Come and see us.